Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 18 of the Ark Podcast. And boy, has it been a crazy week with the Trump win last week. It's opened a bunch of things off. In terms of politics, it's been the equivalent of an airstrike from the US coming to back up the freedom community in Australia. What does the Trump administration look like? Who are Trump's picks? What ways has this opened up things for Australia? And where does this leave things standing with the Misinformation Bill? Where does this leave things standing with all the wars going on in Ukraine and the South China Sea, or with regards to Israel-Palestine? We'll be breaking all of this apart. And to help actually break all of this down, on my right, I've got Steve and Tripp. Steve has the Commanding the Narrative podcast. I'm looking forward to hearing more from Steve. He joined us on our last podcast. I've got Paul Vallejo, former NASA scientist and a phenomenal bloke that's been on the podcast many times, a familiar face. I've also got on my left Shaquille Letma, Shaquille with a background of finance and a regular to the show, especially with live streams. And I've also got Elvis, who is a phenomenal fellow MMA fighter. Do not attack the kids because Elvis will break your legs, basically. Love Elvis. And someone that's helped get many good people elected to the parliament. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's go into this. Allow me to paint you a picture. What has happened since Donald Trump actually won? Well, Bitcoin hit 138,000 Aussie dollars. The stock market is incredibly up. Hamas has called for peace talks and a ceasefire with Israel. Qatar is cutting ties with Hamas. Putin says that he welcomes talks with Trump to end the war in Ukraine. In fact, Elon Musk and Trump have actually had a joint call with Zelensky, saying that he's basically not getting another gun for that war, and they're calling for an end to it. The border czar has been selected. We've got this phenomenal guy who was the former director of ICE, and he's going to be put in charge of commanding the pushback, exporting a lot of people in the USA that have arrived illegally. We've got people with closing their legs in America. A lot of women are closing their legs because of the Trump win, blaming the bros and their votes for getting Trump back in. But what does this mean for Australia? Why do we talk about the US politics? Well, as you know, when America sneezes, Australia gets a cold, and sometimes that works in the inverse. Sometimes that actually, when good things happen in America, it benefits Australia a lot. How is this sense of optimism in Australia going to translate into the election in March or May next year for Australia? How is the Misinformation Bill going to be implemented with a Trump person in office? J.D. Vance and a number of people in Trump's coming administration have made comments about this Misinformation Bill and hate speech laws in Europe, and how they may withhold NATO support or defence support if they don't uphold freedom of speech. How is this going to affect Australia? Gentlemen, before I get into the details of the show, how are you feeling a week on? I can't believe it's been a week on from the win. I mean, Paul, you're an American.
Yeah.
How did you vote, by the way, and how did that feel?
Yep. No, it was great. It was one of the first votes that I've had that I was really deeply excited about. This is an opportunity for change. So the fog of war is now lifting, and we get to see what some of the things that are coming next. You know, first there was, is Trump going to win? Next is the deep state going to control his administration like it did in 2016? You know, we had Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo say, oh, I'm available for the job. Bill Gates said, oh, I donated to Kamala $50 million, but I'd love to run your FDA. And who he says no to and who he says yes to is a very big next question.
Gentlemen?
Yeah, look, I think it's very interesting. You mentioned Bitcoin at the start. It's one of the policies that, the Libertarian Party is pushing. What's interesting is just recently, for the first time, Bitcoin beat the market share on silver. I think that's very interesting. I think that's telling for what's coming forward as well.
Obviously, it's been very, very exciting seeing Trump and all his announcements and everything like that. But for me, it's been a real contrast between our two countries. America seems to be going one way, we're going the complete opposite way. And even the day after the election, when we're all celebrating, Albanese's trying to sneak through all his censorship bills. Let's not call it misinformation, disinformation, and use the other side's language. These are censorship bills. So, look, that's the standout point for me. We've got some big fights here in this country. Obviously, we can look to America with a lot of hope and a lot of excitement, but when we come back crashing down to earth here in Australia, there's some big hurdles to get over.
Very true.
Yeah, look, there is a pendulum in politics, right? Things go to the left, they go to the right. I think for a very long time, since I've been an adult, things have been progressively going more and more to the left. And I'm sitting there going, how absurd does it have to get before it swings back? I was beginning to feel a little bit disheartened by how things are going in Australia, how things are going in the United States. But finally now, I think my faith has been restored, and I'm so proud of the United States that they've actually said no to a lot of this rubbish. And I'm hoping that Donald Trump's going to be able to do the things that he said. As you said in your opening there, all of these world conflicts, and all of a sudden Hamas wants to have a peace agreement. Russia wants to have a peace agreement. All of these world conflicts are being brought under control. The markets are doing very well. Look, I'm not a crypto guy because I'm a dinosaur and I just I struggle with tech. I'm just a technophobe. I am beginning to learn a lot more about it. I'll finally be opening my first account next week. But I see the benefit in it, and I see how much people are using it. And look, what a fantastic future, where innovation's not going to be stifled by government regulation. The government's there to let people, be able to do the things that they want.
Can I ask? Some is left-right, but some is swamp and anti-swamp.
Yes.
The war machine, the FBI, all these controlled narratives that they have under control that were uniparty. On both sides.
Yep, freedom versus authoritarianism.
Yes, that's right. And so there's the left-right dynamic, but there's also the authoritarian versus freedom dynamic, and the swamp creatures that have had control of universities, defense departments, three-letter agencies. And this is one of the places where Australia seems like we're still very much mired in the swamp.
Well, as you mentioned, it's like we've noticed our politics shifting left. But what's crazy is not just the left getting further left, but our supposed conservatives shifting left. What we need is a reset. We need to move them back to the right. Either minor parties dragging those majors back to the right, or the people deciding that they want to elect the people who are more conservative, more moving to the right, more freedom, less authoritarian.
Yeah, and we saw that at local council, didn't we? And we're seeing that all around the world in different areas. Unfortunately, we've seen a swing against incumbents in some countries like India, but in Australia we had local elections recently, and yourself got very close, within 200 votes to winning a local seat. But oh my gosh, did you Libertarians get 11 seats in New South Wales?
Yeah, both Victoria and New South Wales scored quite a few seats. The people were very open to our policies and the ideas that we put behind it. And it's about building that grassroots movement. There are three levels of government, and they are independent, but they work together. And if you can spread your message at one level, you can transfer it up to the next level. And I think that's going to be very telling coming up for the federal election.
I'd like to just make a mention of the sort of left-right dichotomy. We can talk about left-right in relation to family values and social issues, but the other big one, and I think we've joked about this a lot because some of my right-wing friends think that I'm a bit left, and my left-wing friends think that I'm a right-wing nutjob. But one of the things that I've really talked about a lot, again, the whole time I've been an adult, is the overreach of large corporations. Now, I have nothing against corporations as such, and why would I trade the markets? So, that's how I earn a living, is by trading stocks and shares and futures and etc. But what we're seeing is large corporations using government power to give themselves monopoly rights, to be able to squeeze out competition.
Yep, crony capitalism.
Exactly. Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Now, if you're a capitalist like I am, and I think that more countries have actually achieved an improvement in their quality of life and have been able to bring their population out of poverty because of capitalism than any other system. It has its flaws, but it's the fairest and best system that we've ever come up with. What we're seeing now is not the Adam Smith invisible hand type capitalism. It's not the guy who's being left alone to run a butcher shop or a bakery or a fruit and veggie shop or whatever, or the local blacksmith and the local small business owner. You're not seeing that anymore. You're seeing these mega corporations, and they come in and they basically stifle all competition. And that's something that actually, if you look at what Bernie Sanders and even, dare I say, Elizabeth Warren, when they talk about the excesses of private equity, I actually think that they've got a good point. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't think that taxation is a way to solve that, but they do bring up a good point. So, if anything, if you have a look at where the Republicans are today in the United States, Bernie Sanders should actually go and join the Republicans. He really should, because they're actually heading in the same sort of direction. They're sitting there saying, look, these things are unfair. They're unfair on the people, and it's out of control.
Well, we saw it with COVID. Like, they shut down the small businesses, but they kept the large corporations open and running. And then if you have a look at our country at the moment, the largest growth sector is the government. Something like a 23% increase in the government in new positions. I think something like 10% increases over the national wage from the government. It's the largest growing sector, and that's insanity. And you can guess which markets they are. It's climate change, the energy market, I think water as well, but healthcare. But it's the areas that we really don't need that much bureaucracy with climate change or the energy market in that area, but that's where it's growing. That's why taxes are going up. That's why government spending is the biggest cause of inflation. The more they spend, the greater the inflation is going to be. And everything they're doing is to try and counteract their own spending.
Instead of having small companies that succeed with good products, innovation, and a fast turnaround, what we have is companies that decide that they're going to succeed with the help of government, with increasing regulation, and then it only funnels money to the connected companies that are part of that basically public-private partnership, aka, well, I don't want to use that word.
But you see a lot of absolute nonsense with this, and even if we go back decades in your beautiful country that I respect and love immensely, but geez, you guys have come up with some terrible ideas over the years. So the farmers were being paid to grow crops by one agency, and another agency was paying those same farmers to destroy those crops.
Yep.
We've just heard, I think, in the last couple of months, Joel, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there was a report that Anthony Albanese's government is paying farmers here not to grow food. What are we doing?
Yeah,
right?
It's insanity.
When I
UK,
lived back in Western Australia, we had the potato growers board, and there was a restriction on how many potatoes you could grow. Why? I don't know. I'm sure there's some wisdom there somewhere. Then they basically made farmers that they said to the farmers, you can't sell the food, you can't give it away, and so the farmers were just letting it rot on the side of the road.
Yep.
Meanwhile, St Vincent de Paul was doing a Christmas run and asking people to donate money, and they're buying food for Australians, and specifically Western Australians, that are doing it tough. And they're buying the food from overseas to give them, while our farmers' food is being left to rot. This is the problem with government. And the problem is that big corporations know how to use that to their benefit, and the rest of us are left behind. And there's no lobby group to represent us. So I think we really do need to contain that. And
let's not forget the amount of industries that are built off subsidies. They wouldn't survive if the government wasn't giving them money. I mean, a large part of the majority of our renewable energy market is built off subsidies. Even rooftop solar is built off subsidies. These markets wouldn't exist to the size they are now without government subsidies. And that, as you said, stifling innovation and other options.
If you're going to have a subsidy on solar, why not produce them here? As far as I know, I think there's only 2 companies that produce solar panels in Australia. Most solar panels that you put on your roof are produced overseas. The big one that I'm really concerned about, which I would actually, in the rare case, I would actually support a subsidy, which is the manufacture of pharmaceuticals. We'll take something like penicillin. There's 4 companies, last time I checked, there's 4 companies in the world that produce penicillin. One is in Austria. It doesn't produce even enough for Austria. The other 3 are in China. Now, I'm not going to say anything negative about China, but if there's any kind of event, it could be a weather event, it could be some sort of disruption to supply, it drives up prices of penicillin, and it actually creates a worldwide shortage in penicillin. Why aren't we making penicillin here? Why aren't they making penicillin in the United States?
It's also a strategic good. You cannot allow all your strategic goods to be manufactured overseas, particularly at uncertain times or with possible strategic competitors. If you have a situation where people here are dying of staph infections because there's some kind of global conflict, that's completely unacceptable. So when it comes to only certain strategic things, it makes sense to, our energy industry, we are choosing dependence. We have everything we need here in Australia. We have cheap, reliable power with domestic local energy sources, but we're choosing to export those overseas and bring back unreliable power, non-renewable, they're not renewable, bring back unreliable power to have high-cost unreliable power here. It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, the more that you scratch beneath the renewables question, you start to see how the game is played. So these companies will pop up and say, we're going to build a wind project out in Cooler somewhere, it's going to be this size, and the community will get really upset with, they'll want to push back against it. That company will then pull out, that project won't go ahead, but they still get paid. And then they'll just move on to the next project, announce it, say how wonderful it is, and then they pull out, they still get paid.
There's no
so
disincentive.
they don't even have to build these projects, and they still get their money. And it's all taxpayers' money, and there's no accountability, and the game just keeps rolling on.
No disincentive for failure.
And the
what we
biggest
teach our children is work hard, get an education, work hard, and you'll be okay. And that's the pathway to wealth. No, it's not. The pathway to wealth is don't work hard at all. Just make a lot of friends, network, make sure you've got contacts with lobbyists and politicians, and you'll find a way to be able to get a subsidy. That's how a lot of the wealthy people today.
Yeah, if you want to make money, you try and find out how you're going to get money from government.
Yep.
Well, the energy market is probably one of the best examples because it affects so much else. Like our entire manufacturing industry, like it's not just pharmaceuticals, it's everything from steel to cars to clothing. Everything is getting more expensive. It becomes untenable to continue to manufacture here. So what happens is because the energy prices go up, cost of manufacturing goes up, the cost of goods here goes up. So now people stop buying here, so these companies can't afford to keep running, so it ends up being outsourced to overseas countries. And then, as you said, if there is any sort of incident globally where we lose access to these things, we have nothing here. We have no ability to do it. And as you said, we have the resources, the raw. We're one of the most mineral-rich countries in the world. Literally, we have all the nuclear fuel we need. We have all the oil, coal, gas, everything you need for energy.
You're right.
To be self-sufficient. I mean, even let's have a look at iron ore. We're one of the if not the largest, or one of the largest iron ore producers out there. But what do? We ship it overseas and then buy it back as steel at something like 1,000% markup. It's ridiculous. Like our steel manufacturing has been shut down. We've lost the ability to make our own steel. And then again, that puts costs up and makes us reliable on overseas markets.
It's astonishing because I was looking at a story the other day and they're seriously considering which suburbs are going to be blacked out before the others, for example, in Sydney. Now, I hope and pray that, I hope it never happens, because people will die if it's a severe enough blackout because of obviously hospitals and home care and all that sort of stuff, and accidents. They're predicting it, and they have a backup plan in terms of, okay, well, these are the first suburbs to be shut down. Now, I cannot think of a more efficient way to turn southwest and western Sydney blue, because it's currently heavily red for Labor. I can't think of a more powerful way to turn them blue than seeing those suburbs basically turn off to the electricity.
Well,
I think
look,
it'd be nuts.
You have a look at COVID, it's like when they shut down the electorate, it was the Western Sydney that got shut down. So if anyone's going to get shut down first, I guarantee it's going to be the Western Sydney. They were the ones that had the LGAs of concern, were restricted to their homes. And so if the government thinks they're the least important, they're the ones they're willing to restrict there, you can guarantee that they're the suburbs they're going to shut down when it comes to power. They're like, well, who can we shut down first? It's going to go that way.
If you think it's not going to happen, you need to look at South Africa. That's the crystal ball. Now, if you go back to the 1970s, South Africa were pretty much on a level playing field with us here in Australia, if not a little bit more advanced than us, because they're cut off from the rest of the world and they had to produce their own, manufacturing, a lot of defense stuff they had to produce themselves. If you look at them now, they have power rationing, where you're set on a schedule where you might only have power maybe 4 days of the week or whatever it might be. That is where, well, that's the road that we could easily lead to. If you think it's not going to happen here, it happened in South Africa. They didn't upgrade their system.
We're actually being warned right now by the National Energy market operators that there's no choice. If they're going to shut down the coal-fired plants, that's what's going to happen.
Yep.
You look at
You
South
turn a
Africa.
raring off, that's when it all...
Well, and
You look at South Africa. You want to go to a restaurant? What's the restaurant going to do? Because they can't keep their meat and everything cold, right? So they're running diesel generators and all sorts of stuff. And then, of course, because people in Africa don't have an awful lot of money, so in order to be able to afford that, they've got to pay more money for the food when they go to a restaurant, which means they don't go out as much, and it just creates this spiral.
I was only there in January. Sorry to cut you off, but I was only there in January, and this app...
South Africa.
Yes, in South Africa, and the app actually shows you these brownouts, they call them, these intermittent brownouts. It's like, oh, okay, they've got it on there a week in advance. They've got all the brownouts, and it's like, okay, well, this time you've got to plan for this and this and this. Strangely enough,
Can I recommend your next trip be somewhere like the United States rather than South Africa?
No, look, it was a great trip. No, it was a real eye-opener. I reckon one of the most powerful things people can do, especially for their kids, is to take them to places like South Africa so they can see Australia is not the norm. Australia is not the norm. We are a very privileged and blessed country, and if we allow these politicians that live in Canberra, the only place that voted yes to the voice referendum, to write policy for rural Australia, it'll be distorted and wrong, and it's not going to be rooted in reality, unfortunately.
The thing we have to realise is, even though it's happening now, this has been on the cards for a while. Like, I only discovered a lot of this economic problems and the political side of things over the last couple of years. About 2020, 2021 is where I started realising something was going wrong, and I could see back then we were going to have energy problems, and I was clueless back then, but it was obvious to me. I set myself up I'm like, okay, I'm going to need energy. I need to be prepared. I set up solar, battery, all that sort of stuff in my house because I could see it coming. And if it keeps going this way, it's going to happen. Even with, if they bring in Dutton's nuclear policy, but they still shut down the coal-fired plants, we're still going to be stuck because it's still years before those plants. We need to get those plants open, not just keep them open, but reopen some of the other ones to ensure that we keep our energy security.
Another example is Yorkshire. You might be able to correct me, Paul. But Yorkshire in the UK, they've got a coal plant there that they've completely shut off from using coal. There's a coal mine right next to it, and they're importing wood chips. They're putting them on a boat. They're shipping it in, putting them on trucks, driving them halfway across the country to get to this plant, to burn them in this coal plant, which causes far more emissions than coal could. But because it's coming in from an overseas source, it doesn't count towards their carbon emissions.
But let's not overlook something. Which overseas source? Because there was a report that came out that said the UK was going to start bringing in some of this product from North Korea and Russia. Like, really? Now I was going to talk about Africa for a minute. So one of the things I noticed in Africa, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a government person over there, a little bit younger than me, and he's got a 17-year-old kid. Now, okay, I've been pretty reckless in my life, so that's why I don't have any children yet, but 17-year-old kid, and most of them, in their late 30s, early 40s, had teenage children. Very rare that you would see a 35-year-old without kids. Here, it's almost the norm for people not to have kids until they're in their 30s. You go out to the Masai Mara and you see how they live. And what was really interesting is they don't have access to an awful lot of information. I was sitting there with one of the tribal chiefs, and he comes to me and he says, Shaquille, you're an American. Yeah, close enough. I'll go with that. That's fine. He said, how does a man become a woman and a woman become a man? and they don't get, but this is where our focus is. The reason I brought that up, though, about Yorkshire, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it the Yorkshire or the West Yorkshire police that arrested that 16 or 15, 16-year-old autistic girl that went viral about 6 months ago, where she had made a statement about the officer looking like her grandmother, who was a lesbian, and then they came in and arrested her, and the girl was clearly freaking out, and she had problems with her spine and all that. Remember that?
Yeah.
How this is where their focus is. Now, you've got crime rates out of control in the UK, and you've got all sorts of issues. You've got underfunding for the police department. You've got underfunding for the justice system in the UK, all sorts of reform, and this is what they're focusing on?
Well, and jail systems are full as well. So what they're doing is releasing hardened criminals to put in people who are spreading misinformation on the internet. It's insanity. It's just the idea of jailing someone for posting something online and then letting out a criminal who's physically done something wrong to replace
I actually mentioned that on air. Now, I'm British, by the way.
Okay.
Right? So that's right. I was born here, but I happen to be British. So I mentioned this on air, and all I said was, this is what the reports are. That sounds a bit extreme. It doesn't sound believable, but that's what the reports are, that they're actually letting people out of prison early to lock people up for misinformation, especially over that guy that stabbed those 3 little girls that were doing anything, just little kids dancing to Taylor Swift, and they got stabbed and all that. So I said that, and I probably shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it because, I saw you. One of the law enforcement agencies over in the UK looked me up on LinkedIn. And I saw it. I was like, why are they looking me up? Like, what's your problem? Freedom of speech, you're going to extend that to British citizens that live overseas? Come on now.
Speaking of...
by the way, we have to correct something because we covered it at the time on the show.
Yep.
Now, we covered that was actually fake news, that the man happened to have a Muslim background. It turns out he did have an Islamic background. That was... there was some sort of Islamic text in his and so a lot of people that jumped to the streets and said, look, this is not on, and blah 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 blah, a lot of them have been locked up, they've been sentenced. They even tried to get Nigel Farage to resign prematurely, and it's like they turned out they were right.
So what was fake news?
What was fake news was the fact that they were saying that this person didn't have an Islamic sort of motivation.
They tried to sweep that under the rug.
But the real issue here is, half my family Muslim. The people that are Middle Eastern hear my name, they're like, "Isn't he Muslim?" Yes, but I've got an anglicised surname, so half my family are Christian, half my family are Muslim. I can tell you that when I go and speak to imams, like, what's going on, and they sit there and go, "We don't understand why government is trying to support these criminals. This is exactly what we were trying to get away from. We don't want these sorts of people." And actually, if you go and talk to a lot of the imams, they're the first ones to say, hey, that guy's a problem. They're the ones that actually want this to be eradicated. And if you think about it logically, if you're a refugee that's come from some of these countries, you don't want the violence. You don't want the brutal application of these laws. So what we're seeing is that in their effort, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, in their effort to be nice and inclusive, they're actually supporting the worst parts of those cultures instead of supporting the majority, which are moderate. I don't know of any Muslim person that would support or condone what actually happened in the UK or elsewhere. Where we see these
the best people to spot radicalism are Muslims. You just got to look at Islamic countries, and it's like, okay, obviously 100% Muslim country, why aren't they always killing each other, and completely unfettered? How do they deal with the radicals in their community? And it's like, well, they have answers. You're just not listening. You've allowed that this PC culture to actually infiltrate your police force so that you don't, go after these Pakistani rape gangs in the UK. And now you've got the worst of both worlds. You've got the worst of tolerance, and you've got the worst of this third world Islamic culture. And even the Muslims in these countries are saying, you need to get this under control. Otherwise, we're all going to be attacked by these people protesting in the streets because you're not doing your job. And that's exactly what happens.
Because it's not Islamic culture, though. That's the thing. It's not Islamic culture. Go to Qatar, go to Kuwait, go to Oman, go to the UAE. So the UAE's had all of this success, still a Muslim majority country, still a Muslim country at its core, right? But they've liberalised themselves to attract Westerners to try to grow. And what have all the other Gulf countries done? They've all looked at the success and said, okay, that's what we want, including Saudi Arabia. The new prince in Saudi Arabia, he's like, okay, yeah, this seems like a good idea. Maybe we need to, stop some of the more stringent Wahhabism and allow a little bit more liberty, right? Do you think that they, in any Middle Eastern country, would accept some of the violence against young children? Or accept some of the violence against the community? Of course not. They wouldn't tolerate that at all. They'd give you the death penalty for it.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes some of these Gulf countries relatively good. It's the idea, very good. The idea that you know who the king is in that country. You know where the buck stops. Who's running the UK? Who's running the UK? It's very unclear. And I think this is kind of a whole analogy for the world, if I can just pivot back to Trump coming back in. there is a sense that daddy's back, if that makes sense. Putin is welcoming peace talks. You've got the Middle East straightening its back and being like, all right, we'll cut it out, basically. We've got South Asia looking like we're going to have a relatively peaceful time over the next 4 years as well. And I think it's because the way that the world is, when you don't have dad around, when you don't have the guy that with the big stick walking around, it's like, well, it's a bunch of gangs running around for their own interests, and it's sort of a free-for-all. Whereas when he's in, it's like, okay, I know where I stand with this guy. I know not to mess around with him. And I know that I can work with him on a mutually beneficial deal. He will be fair. We will cut a deal so that we can both be prosperous. And I think that's why Putin respects Trump. Putin truly wants, his country to flourish. He truly does. Now, does that mean that he wants to expand his country when he has the opportunity? Of course. But you've also got to look out for your own interests, and I think that's what Trump does. And so I'm really very I haven't been this optimistic in a very long time.
Well, there's two good points on that. Is one, Trump is very clear about what he wants to achieve, what the line is. He puts the line in the sand. You know where it is. You cross the line, you know what's going to happen. You stay on the side, you know what's going to happen. He's very clear. Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, Trump supports Russia, that's why he's doing it. I'm not sure if anyone saw this, but recently on Russian TV, as much as, Russia respect Trump, they're still Russia, and they understand US is separate. They started posting photos of Melania Trump when she did a semi-nude spread in a magazine 20 years ago or something like that. She did it a long time ago, but they started posting that online so that, they're not pro-America or pro-Trump. They respect him and they will work with him, but it's not like it's an alliance or anything like that. So people need to kind of keep that in mind.
I think a key thing is that Trump is not part of the neoconservative or neoliberal blob. Yeah. There's been a group of people who have had it in for Russia for a very long time. Victoria Nuland and Miss Piggy, Liz Cheney and her McCain. They've been trying to push this issue for a very long time, at the great cost of the United States. Hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars we've spent to arm Ukraine, and it's not working. That war is lost, and pretty much everyone knows it. It could have ended with the Istanbul Accords in 2022, but they sent Boris Johnson to torpedo that. To torpedo that peace deal. And if we had done that, we would have had more money and more lives on all sides. And I think Trump is well aware that that needs to end, because it's all been a complete grift and a failure.
And we're seeing, sorry, can I just say, we're seeing that with his picks as well. If you look at the tweet that he put out, he says Ambassador Nikki Haley and Secretary Mike Pompeo, they will not be joining the administration, and this is a very clear
sign.
Pivot from the previous neocons, the Boltons of the world, and I think this has been a very welcome thing from the sort of progressive left, people much like yourself. Would you say, Shaquille?
Absolutely. But look how polite he was there.
Yeah, very
much
polite.
Yeah, working with them. Like to thank them for their service. Look, I think that it is a matter now. If we go right back, politics wasn't supposed to be a career, right? Politics was supposed to be somebody like myself. I can't do it, so much autism. Somebody like myself that says, hey, you know what, I've got some experience in trading the markets, and I think that we should make some changes to, the function of how our stock markets work. So I'd like to become a minister that, is in charge of that. I go out, get elected. I'm there for 8 years, 10 years. I leave, and I go back to my normal life. That's what politics used to be. That's not what it is now. I just want to push back slightly on what you said about Vladimir Putin. Does he actually want to, turn all of those those Eastern Bloc countries back into the USSR? I'm not sure he does. The reason I say that is when this war first happened, I kept asking the question, what does he want? Why did he go in there? See, when Osama bin Laden pulled his little stunt in September 11, we got to hear from him. We got to, he wrote his manifestos. He wrote his letter to America. We had a lot of access to him. We got to hear everything that he was saying. We've heard nothing from Russia. There's been a media blackout on it. And all we've been told is he's trying to do all these horrible things. So then you've got to go back in time a little bit, and you see Nigel Farage talking about this at the European Union. We see other leaders. We see this being brought up at the United Nations, that there was some sort of problem. Now, I'm not an expert on this in this area, so I'm not trying to say that this is actually the situation, because I don't know. But there were reports that the people on the eastern part of Ukraine felt that they were more aligned with Russia than Ukraine. And they were labelled as terrorists and spreading misinformation, if that sounds familiar, and they were mistreated. And Vladimir Putin kept bringing it up, and then eventually said, look, we need to do something about it. Now, I can't say whether he's right or wrong, because I just simply don't know enough about the area. But I'd like to know why media is not giving us a holistic view of what's actually going on.
It's complete propaganda, absolutely. For the first year, they were saying, oh, Russia's lost, Russia's run out of ammo. And then a year later, they're like, actually, we're running out of ammo, and Russia's producing. The Ghost of Kiev was complete nonsense. But you're absolutely right. It's absolutely been about narrative control. After the Maidan coup in 2012, I believe it was, Victoria Nuland was caught on camera picking out the cabinet for the new Ukrainian government. So, we have had deep state actors in Ukraine for a very long time. And Putin, from what I understand, has made it very clear he cares about a couple of things. One is not having Ukraine part of NATO, because that is, well inside what he considers his red line sphere of control, and clearly no missiles, no nuclear weapons, and also to protect the Russian-speaking the Russian-speaking part of eastern Ukraine, which when the Maidan coup happened, that part of Ukraine basically voted to secede, and at least at the very least, when they tried to secede, that's when there was basically a civil war. So
we see this with Russia. People say, the whole communist past, etc. Now, look, there's no question in my mind. There's probably significantly more visible corruption than what we're used to seeing in the West. However, St. Petersburg's a beautiful place. You've got a highly educated young population there. Moscow as well, but Moscow's a bit more political. St. Petersburg, fantastic place. Great architecture, great country, big country. High levels of education, high levels of quality of life. What are they doing? And if they're so communist, I remember before this broke out, I was looking at tax rates around the world. You know what the tax rate is in Russia? 13%. 13%. That doesn't sound so communist to me.
Yeah.
So clearly they want to drive innovation. We've actually seen that there's, people always talk about, well, the Russian hackers are doing this and that. So in other words, we can assume or deduce from that Russian IT staff are actually quite competent. That they've got a burgeoning IT
industry,
field,
yep.
Right? Yep. So I've had a look at what they teach kids, and I look at China, I look at the Middle East, I look at Russia. What do they teach their kids? Well, computer programming and computer science and IT and all those sorts of things, they teach that at high school. Now they're starting to talk about teaching that in middle school, which is sort of our year 5 to year 8 kids. They're starting to introduce that at that level. We, on the other hand, are introducing, there's an unlimited amount of genders that you can
ideology.
pick. That's what we're introducing.
Yeah.
You know any children or teenagers? Do any of you guys know any teenagers that are learning about computer programming, AI, anything like that in their school curriculum right now?
No, not in the curriculum. The kids go out and learn it themselves. I mean, that's at least something which is good there. But it's not in the.
But they learn it themselves from what YouTube videos, not from their teacher at school.
And I will a note. One point you said visible corruption. It's like yes, they have more visible corruption. Doesn't mean they necessarily have more corruption.
And can I
did make a point of saying visible.
No, I figured you did.
Can I just say something, Shiko? When it comes to the rebuttal to that, people, to play devil's advocate, they'll be like, oh, Shaquille and this panel that Joel's hosting, they're Putin apologists, they're Russia apologists, they're anti-West. It's like, no, we're not. We're just seeing what our opponents are doing, and we're saying it's not good enough what we're doing. Why is it that Australia, America, we're spending more than we ever have in the past on education? What was it? The education department in America was founded in the 70s, and they were number 1 in education back then, supposedly, and now they're number 26. I mean, what's going on in Australia is terrible as well. I mean, the amount of money we pour into education, and Russia's kicking our ass. Zimbabwe's kicking our ass, for God's sake, in education. And I look at this and I'm just thinking, guys, yes, Russia is doing a good job on this stuff. Doesn't mean that they're the perfect country, but there's nothing wrong with comparing it to it. I'm just thinking that.
So I'll answer your question this way. I'll leave the two bookends on this panel aside for a minute. All right. What I'm not anti-West. I'm anti. I'm not going to swear. Bull dust. I'm anti the bull dust that we all have to put up with. Your parents immigrated to this country. My parents immigrated to this country. You've immigrated to this country.
Correct.
Are we wrong? Were our parents wrong? Because to listen to the politicians and to the media today, we are an irredeemably horrible, racist, sexist, misogynistic, terrible country. At protests, we see Australian flags burned, more so in the United States. They see those flags burned, which is horrific, in my opinion. Texas v. Johnson notwithstanding. So, are we all wrong? Did our families make a mistake by coming here? Should we instead have moved to Afghanistan? Should we instead have moved to all these other countries? Because when we see these activists going out and protesting against Australian values and American values and freedom and liberal democracy, if these are not the things that you're passionate about, which tends to be not actually immigrants that have worked to get here, it tends to be, I don't know, you guys are the exception to the rule.
No, my parents were first generation.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, I include you as well there. We'll just pick on Steve.
The odd one out.
But this is what we're seeing. We're actually seeing that the more white and inner city you are, the more you hate the country. And what I would say, I don't like the sign, the F off, we're full sign. But I'm going to say this. You don't have to love Australia. That's okay. That's fine. You don't have to love Australia or America. That's fine. Do what my family did. My family came to this country because they thought they'd have better opportunities. If you hate it here so much, try to move to a country that you think you'd have a better quality of life. If you want to move to China or Russia or any of these other countries, go for it. Send Joel an email. I'll hook you up.
Well, this also brings
up Joel at the Ark Podcast.
Well, brings up another conundrum. It's like we talk about reparations, like we're responsible for everything that happened to the Indigenous people in this country, yet the majority of people weren't even here at that time. Like you said, like a large portion of our country are immigrants who've come in here looking for a better life. And now we're also being held responsible for what happened like generations ago. It doesn't make sense. Like you want to support immigration, you want people coming to the country, but then when they come in, you want to hold them responsible for something they had nothing to do with.
Can I say something on that topic? I've got a bone to pick with the whole Aboriginal sort of shill movement in Canberra. I recently learnt in it was December last year, just after the voice referendum, while I was in Zimbabwe, one of the safari directors, he was telling us about, the first people. He was telling us about the Bushmen people. These people they are amazing. Their bodies have adapted to actually live longer out in the open. They sort of live how we think the original Aboriginals would live, except their bodies haven't changed. You know how camels have a hump, especially when they drink water? So the Bushmen, they can eat in a single sitting 55 kilos of meat.
Wow.
55 kilos of meat. And you can visually see, as they're eating, their butt getting larger. They've got like this additional sort of compartment. Now the Bushmen, the safari guide that was showing us around, he was shocked to when we said, we've never heard of the Bushmen before. And he said, how could you not have heard of them? They were the originals to Australia, and they were wiped out by the Aboriginals. And I was just like, what? Now again, this is a personal story before the fact checkers at the AAP and RMIT Fact Lab get too excited. This is what he told me, which I'm very interested to look into the history on.
Wow.
And there's also apparently a pygmy race that was here before the Aboriginals as well that was wiped out. And there is actually documentation which supports that as well.
Literally. And so it's like, okay, all right. So we had a bunch of Aboriginal tribes here. They claim that Australia was conquered, but sovereignty was never ceded. A treaty was never signed. Therefore, we need a treaty. Where's your treaty with those people you wiped out? Where's your treaty with those people? And this is what I'm wondering right now. I'm like, well, all of this crap about reparations, all this crap about $42 billion every budget given to you guys, it's all based on a false premise. And I'm like, I'm not playing your game anymore.
All land
This
has been
is silly.
conquered and reconquered throughout time.
Literally,
Throughout
every man's equal. Every man's equal. One man, one vote. You know, we don't want to see people dispossessed in society. We want to help everyone. But this rent-seeking crap has got to stop.
I agree with that.
And who in Australia has the guts to stop that? Because Peter Dutton, I mean, after Trump's win, everyone's been saying, Peter Dutton, he's going to win in May next year. And I'm like, I beg to differ. He's always slow. He was slow to oppose the Voice. He was slow to oppose the Misinfo Bill.
Actually, no. Just to clarify that, he wasn't slow. He supported most of those bills. He supported E-Karen. He supported the Misinformation Bill. He supported the Voice. He supported all these bills. And then once he saw what the voters were thinking, his position changed. It's not that he was on the right side from the start. He was on the wrong side because he thought it was going to get him the votes. When he realized that's not where the majority of the community was, he switched. So don't think he's running on the correct side. He's fair weather.
Yeah, and as a matter of public record, when the Bishop Murray was stabbed on the 16th of April this year, him and the official Liberal Party policy and Susan Ley, the Deputy Liberal member, said, we will give Labor the votes they need in order to pass a misinformation bill. See, that's gone to history. But I remember that because I covered it at the time. It was only after the bishop himself went on camera and Rami filmed a video with him where the bishop said, no, I'm happy for the video to go up and stay up. It's the truth and we should leave the truth out there. In fact, he provided a written affidavit to help Elon Musk's lawsuit against E-Karen. It was only then that Peter Dutton found his spine. That's not leadership. You might as well just resign. You're not worthy to be a member of your constituency, and you're not worthy to lead a once great party, the Liberal Party.
I think it's my fault for people like me. No, I really do, because people like me have been the more liberal side of the Liberal Party that have put a lot of pressure on the Conservative side of the Liberal Party to say, look, can you just be a bit more moderate? You've gone too far to the right. Now I'm going to sit there and say, Peter Dutton and all you Conservatives, move back to the right. Go back to the right. We were wrong. Go back to the right.
You do have to give them some credit. When it comes down to the vote, and the vote's been taking place this week, they've voted against the Misinformation Bill. And people like Kevin Hogan, MP for Page, he stepped up, and a lot of them stepped up to speak out very strongly against the Misinformation Bill. So we can talk about what the origins were, but where it counts now, where it's in Parliament now, being debated in the House, and it's about to go to the Senate. They have stepped up and they are pushing back.
Do you think they're pushing back because of, great personal intestinal fortitude?
Well, some of them are.
Of course not. No, I don't think so.
Some of them are.
They're doing it, I think, because they can actually see that the majority of Australians absolutely detest this. But I would like to just very quickly come back to reparations, if that's okay. So I love this idea that we're going to break people down by skin colour. Most white people who actually came here in the first fleets of Australia, they weren't the aristocrats. They were the people that were sent over here for, what do we all learn at school, because they stole a piece of bread or something like that, and that's why they got sent here, right? They were the people that were mistreated by the aristocrats. Those aristocrats didn't mistreat people of colour because they were people of colour. They mistreated their own people. Have a look at what England looked like back in those days. Have a look at... Look, we make fun of it now with Oliver, could I have one more bowl, please, and things like that. The chimney sweepers, we all dress our kids up like that. The reality is that these little kids were sent up chimneys, and some of them would die up there, and they'd be given a couple of coins for doing that. That's how the aristocrats and the wealthy treated white people. So why is there an expectation that they would have treated people of colour any differently?
Well, I guess
should Americans, when they talk about all of this discrimination, why don't they give reparations to the Irish that came over to the United States and were told, no Irish need apply for this job? What's the difference?
I've got another one for you. When is Australia and the Western countries going to pay reparations to Syria for just flattening the place? flattening it.
Well, you're here, aren't you?
I'm here, and this but this is the thing. I have as much claim to reparations for Syria being flattened. I've never been there. I've never been there. But there are Aboriginal people that claim to be Aboriginal. You're not allowed to test them to be Aboriginal, and they're taking these grants to go to these universities and everything. And the angriest people at that is actual Aboriginal people saying, "You guys are cashing in on the pain of our people."
You know, I spoke to a lot of Aboriginal people about the voice, right? Because honestly, I didn't understand what they were even proposing because they didn't tell us. I didn't know. So I spoke to Aboriginal people all over this country. The overwhelming majority of people that I know, and I'm talking like 99% of the people I know, said absolutely not. Absolutely not. Totally opposed to it, right? And it was for the same reason that the general population opposes what we see in the inner cities, right? We don't go for the inner city liberal crap that they come up with. That's exactly how the Aboriginals feel. They're sitting there going, look, why would we want to centralise power with these city dwellers that have absolutely no idea what we're going through? And have a look at the absolute disgusting hatred with which Jacinta Price and her family were treated, with Warren Mundine, how he was treated. Stan Grant. Are you serious? How could you go after Stan Grant?
It's blacker by the day.
Exactly. Absolutely outrageous. So that's why we didn't vote. And, you know, Ray Martin come out and say, oh, you're all dinosaurs and dickheads. Yeah, because we don't like being treated like this.
See, it goes back to what Paul said before about narrative. Where is this? You can twist anything into the narrative that you want, but the big question is, where is this narrative coming from? Now, I've been very fortunate to be able to interview through my podcast people in the UK, people in France, people in Canada, all across the Western world. And what stood out for me is they're facing very, very similar issues, whether it be COVID and the lockstep that we saw in the response to COVID, energy policy, censorship, this misinformation, disinformation term is happening. It's popping up in the UK, it's popping up in America, it's popping up in all different places. The significance of Trump getting elected is that if you look at the Five Eyes, America is a huge piece of that. And if they lose America, that this narrative cannot continue. Because when Donald Trump comes out and he pushes back against misinformation and disinformation, and I've got a quote here because he came out and put a video. He said, "The fight for free speech is a matter of victory or death for America and for the survival of Western civilization itself." So when the President of the United States is coming out and pushing back against this narrative, pushing back against this agenda, then all falls apart because America is such a huge piece of that puzzle and they can't lose America. And lo and behold, they tried to shoot him. They tried to put him in jail. They've tried to do whatever they can to stop him. They haven't been successful so far.
I completely agree with that. Basically, it's like a dam. If you remove a section of the dam, the whole thing comes down. The wall of narrative control is breaking. And, we talked about the different political parties and how some of them are not standing up for their values. They don't actually have courage to stand for those values. And when we have a great example of intestinal fortitude and courage in the face of fire, in the face of assassination attempts, in the face of all the deep state actors coming after him to try to destroy him with lawfare, assassination attempts, the whole media narrative, this is a huge break in the dam of narrative control and propaganda, and we will at some point that wave will come to us, and this is the time where people hopefully can find the courage and break some of that narrative control.
I just got a message from one of my fans in Western Australia who actually asked for one of these hats. She goes, "Can I have one of those Make Australia Great Again hats?"
She can't have mine.
She's somebody who actually is normally on the left, is what I've considered her to be. I was just showing Joel the text message. Why does she send that? Because she doesn't necessarily agree with everything that we say, but she sees that there's a problem. So you've brought up propaganda. People have turned off media. People don't trust media, especially American media, right? People are just so frustrated, they're not listening anymore. And the result of that is you've got us five sitting here on a podcast, and we're probably going to have hundreds of thousands of people that will engage with this podcast, which is more than what CNN's going to get on their news shows. It's more than what MSNBC is going to get on most of their news shows. And if they can't recognise that as being a problem, well, what does make them recognise it?
Failure and corporate closure, bankruptcy.
What people like to see is people having conversations that resonate with them. And I think that's why Joe Rogan is so successful, because he sits down with someone, he has a one-on-one conversation with them, and really they can talk about anything. Paul, you know, the podcast that we did Sunday night, I played a clip of CNN where the host was talking about butter being $3. And he said, oh, you know, no wonder people voted for Kamala because, you know, the price of butter is so high. And his co-host said, hang on, it's $7 for butter, not $3. That shows how out of touch that these hosts are. They don't even know the cost of butter. So how are they able to resonate and to their audience and get across to them that they understand what their audience is facing? Well, when they don't even know the cost of groceries.
There was recently on CNN one of the commentators who basically said the same thing. He goes, we need to have a look at ourselves. You know, we pushed a narrative during the election cycle. We talked about things that were not true or not what were important to the American people, and they didn't understand what the American people wanted. And that's why it was such a resounding victory for Trump, because Trump knew what they wanted. He listened to the people, and that's what he talked about. Whereas the Democratic Party and the captured media on that side, that's all they talked about. And they lost their roots, and they lost their journalistic integrity because they started taking sides. And he realized that they need to step back and provide a balanced view, because the media is there to share information, not to make a judgment call.
And I think that's why it's so powerful when Donald Trump went to McDonald's. Because we all know he's a billionaire and he's rich and he lives in palaces and towers and all that sort of thing, but he was willing to go down to the level of the people and stand alongside them and talk to them and understand where they're coming from. And that's a big step.
And let's not forget the garbage man outfit.
He absolutely deserved to win that election by doing the things he did, going on the podcast, etc. You mentioned something a few minutes ago about having a conversation. I'm always up for a conversation. Media never does it. Somebody said to me the other day, hey, you know, you believe in free speech and freedom of expression. How do you feel about that guy that just got jailed for doing the Nazi salute? And my answer was, I don't know. It's fine. Because I oppose it. I don't think that you should be doing that. I think it's completely wrong. However, if we're going to go with freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and I'm conflicted about that.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
I think it's fine.
But the thing is that surely we should be able to have a conversation. Now, we can have a conversation about it here on the podcast, but you're not going to see media have a conversation about it. But what I find most fascinating is that he's labelled a white supremacist, and him doing that is absolutely wrong. When I was overseas and I saw here in Sydney Harbour, right at the front of the Sydney Opera House, them saying F the Jews, kill the Jews, gas the Jews. Right here in Sydney, in front of one of the most iconic buildings in the world. That broke my heart. And yet nothing's happening to them. So if you're going to say that they've got the freedom of speech to be able to do that, then the guy doing a Nazi symbol, the Nazi salute, even if he was a white supremacist, what's the difference?
Well,
so I find that difficult to... I'm not going to take a side on that. I think it's wrong,
a couple of points on that. First of all, he did it on court steps. So he was actually making a political statement. Like, he did it intentionally. It wasn't like he was caught, you know, at a rally doing it or anything. He got up and he did it, and he knew what the repercussions, because he wanted to make a statement. And so, again, that brings in the problem of, you know, blocking free political speech. I mean, that whether you agree with what he did or not, that's what they're doing. Now, one of the things people understand is I'm a big supporter of freedom of speech. I think it's important that we have that freedom to say what we need. In Australia, it's referred to as freedom of expression, but it's the same idea. But that does not mean freedom from consequences. And what I mean by that is we can now judge you for what you've done. We can hold you accountable. It doesn't mean we're going to arrest you for doing it, but we as a community go, well, you know what? You're a Nazi supporter. I don't like what you're saying. I'm not going to listen to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, or I'm going to tell you I think you're wrong. And that's where freedom of speech allows us to hold them accountable so that you're not free from consequences, but you should still be allowed to say it.
Well, hold up a minute.
And that's
though,
why
because-
freedom of speech has worked in the past, because the community is there to correct people that get out of line. Now, Brian Marlow from Citizen Go was in Parliament this week, and he was talking about community notes on X. He said it's the best form of combating any form of misinformation.
Well, you beat me to it.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, and the clear example is, again, when Paul and I were doing a podcast on Sunday night, I played a clip of what was his name? I've got it here somewhere. Damien Lamini, and he was on The View, or at least I thought he was on The View, pushing back against their response of supporting Kamala. What I didn't know was that it was fake.
Yeah, he's got a whole bunch. They're fantastic.
I didn't know. I'd never seen the guy before. Now, what I was doing was I was pushing misinformation across to my audience. The good thing that happened, that the rest of the panel, after I played the clip, said, "Mate, we love you, Stephen, but that was AI. That was an edit."
Yeah.
I didn't know, but that was the natural response. Your colleagues pull you back into line and say, "Hey, mate, you're on the wrong track here. You need to correct." Now, if this disinformation bill goes through, I get a strike, I get banned, or whatever happens, and the government just cracks the whip. It shouldn't be like that. It should be your fellow colleagues, your fellow friends pulling you back into line.
So many
I just
things.
want to come back. Sorry, just very quickly come back on this. There needs to be consequences. I don't approve of what the guy did. I don't support anybody doing a Nazi salute. I don't support that at all. However, if it's okay for you to burn the Australian flag, if it's okay for you to say some of the most horrendous, violent things about Jewish people or any other group of people, and that's not going to affect your university enrolment, if it's okay for Jewish students in the US and here to be hiding in rooms because protesters are out the front, or for the police to say to them, "Don't wear your school uniform to school because we cannot and will not protect you," if that's okay, I think it might also be okay for people on the other side of the political aisle to do things that are offensive and obnoxious. So I don't support what he did, but if you're going to say there should be consequences for him, there should be consequences for the others as well.
We know it's not really an honest disagreement. We know that these people, when they advocate for these kind of restrictions, it's not really about protecting the public. Protecting the public is the way that totalitarianism gets sold to us. So they will pick someone to try to make an example of some issue, but then they'll roll back a totalitarian law to actually sell us things that we don't actually need.
What's that old saying? If you give up freedom for safety, you'll end up with neither.
Yes.
And then that's basically what's happened. They're very selective about what they're going to censor or restrict because they're building a narrative. But another really important point people have to remember is the censorship laws you support today will be used against you tomorrow.
Absolutely true.
And just to close off this Nazi salute thing, because I kind of said I support it, and I didn't actually tell anyone why. What's that?
Oh, we
picked
just
up by the
assume you're a
AAP?
Nazi.
Literally.
You're already all over media. My American friends come to me, they go, "You're hanging out with a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist, right-wing nut job." I'm like, yeah, cool.
Literally.
So
Literally.
you got a reputation to uphold.
You know that exactly. You know that photo of I can't remember which royal it was, but he had his hand up, and it looked like a Nazi salute from the side on, but if on front on, he's actually waving at the media.
It's
William, was it?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, first off, how do you police it? Second off, we're in the age of deep fakes now. Third off, I actually think if someone does a Nazi salute, that's the best way to say, look, I'm a dickhead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. If he wants to do that, that's fine. If you want to wear, some sort of apron with a weird thing on it, that's fine. You're indicating to the world who you are and what you believe. That's fine. I think it's better that you know who these people are rather than you don't know who they are, and then it just festers. Anyway, moving on from this.
Sorry, can I say one last thing? So you go to Auschwitz. Now I've been there, and it was confusing because I was expecting it to be a horrible, terrible place. And if you watch Schindler's List, it's black and white. It's a black and white movie. You're like, well, we're watching this. It's terrible. And you see all these things happen, and you think, well, if you're my age, you think, well, that happened such a long time ago. It's not now. It's a long time ago. You go there, and actually, it's quite a beautiful place.
Mm.
If you don't know what actually happened there, you've still got the little flowers growing out of the grass and all that. It's a really pretty place. But you know what happened there, and it's just haunting. That's such a tragic thing that human depravity at our worst actually occurred in this location. and then you see some chick who's got a bum out and her fish lips taking a photo, and you go, "Are you serious? Are you? This is the respect. This is the level of respect you're going to show to what happened in this place." Like, this is what we're saying now, is that nobody's taking this stuff seriously anymore, and we're forgetting what happened. And let's be honest about this. This only just happened. When we talk about human history, this just happened. And my grandmother passed away a couple of years ago. She was born in the 20s, which means that she lived through World War I and World War II. Or she was born during World War I, and she lived through World War II. Right? So she was alive when all this was going on. That's only 2 generations away.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking, isn't it?
It just happened.
Yeah.
And now we've got people, oh, let me take a photo. Let me show you my ass.
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
it's nuts. But this is the problem, guys. If you want to make anti-Semitism worse, just resort to banning things like that, because then the cover-up looks worse than the actual punishment. If you cover up this stuff and you don't allow that open debate with people out there, present them the facts, present them the historical data, then they'll be like, what are you hiding? What are you hiding? And that's the problem. Once we're in that realm, you will lose that time and time again. It just takes time. I want to go to the Borders appointment in America. Tom Homan is basically he's been likened to General Patton by Charlie Kirk, the great Charlie Kirk, saying this guy has almost an impossible task thanks to Biden, but he is the man for the job that we want to see bring the border under control. If you don't know who he is, these clips have been circulating around, and they're sort of my favorite ones. Here's one.
Cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is that worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
And here's another one, him with AOC.
This is the best.
Zero tolerance was interpreted as the policy that separated children from their
If I get arrested for DUI and I have a young child in the car, I'm going to be separated. When I was a police officer in New York and I arrested a father for domestic violence, I separated that father
Mr.
from his
Holman,
family.
with all due respect, legal asylees are not charged with any crime.
When you're into the country illegally, it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum, you go through the port of entry, do it the legal way. The Attorney General of the United States has made that clear.
Okay. Mr. Chair, the memo is
I just love it. I love it.
He actually states after that he goes, if you don't like it, change the law. That's what you're there to do.
Right.
submitted to the record
He
for
really
review.
threw it back at him.
Right,
Inspector General.
So the longer one, right. Yeah, no, I'm here for it. America's getting control of its borders, and this is the thing. I once saw a video of Charlie Kirk criticizing Australia. He was saying, Australia, it's a lost cause. Forget about it. Basically, it was tongue in cheek because he wants obviously a lot of people to help America. But he was saying this to an Australian pastor that was over there. He was trying to, get to America, and I just said, hang on. Australia's got control of its borders and it's got control of its vote. Our vote is more secure. What do you guys have? Basically, you don't have those two things, and if you don't have those two things, you can't fix the country. They have resecured. They are going to resecure the border with this guy, and they will shore up their voting system. What was the saying?
Too big to rig?
It was too big to rig, the Trump surge that they did. They did still manage to manipulate some of the voting in Wisconsin's Senate race, unfortunately. But they have done the too big to rig plan.
Yep.
They've registered the low propensity voters, and we're seeing a situation where they actually have a chance to turn the ship around. And I'm here for it.
There's breaking news.
Yeah, mate, hit me.
So Donald Trump announces, quote unquote, that great Elon Musk, working in conjunction with American patriot Vivek Ramaswamy, will lead the Department of Government Efficiency.
Wow. Doge,
Beautiful.
Department of
But
Government Efficiency.
Rand Paul and his father Ron Paul should actually have a role in that. But I'm going to address your counterpart in America, Charlie Kirk. I'm so unhappy with you because you didn't back me up on my call on Virginia. Now, I know you were right, but that's not the point. You could have actually encouraged me for a bit.
Yeah.
I've been saying that for months
Mate,
and months.
how could you be
Virginia's gonna
upset?
flip.
They won all the swing states.
I know, but if
they
they
won
won
the
Virginia-
they won the Senate vote. They've got a majority. They've got a majority in the House as well. So they have the
well,
Congress.
and
They
the
have the
president.
purse. They have the Senate. They're going to have some Supreme Court picks. They won the popular vote by 5 million votes. I mean, it doesn't get bigger than a mandate.
I just want Virginia. I've been calling it for months, right? And I don't want to always be wrong. You know, I'm so heartbroken about Virginia. You know what? New York now. What did she take it by? 11 points. New Jersey was under 10.
Yeah.
Are these swing states now? Are these the next states to become swing states? Because I don't think the Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan are going to go back. I think they're going to move further to the right. So are they the next ones?
Well, one of the tricks is Trump. The populist Republicans have really taken the United States by storm, and there's a lot of things they can do simply by executive order, by the bully pulpit. But the swamp still controls a lot of the Senate and House. You know, Nancy Pelosi didn't get rich because of her congressional salary. She got rich because she grifts off of the government, insider trading. Yeah. There's a lot of people, even in the Republican Party, who have been in office for a very long time, who would love to go back to a world where they can continue to grift the way they have been for decades. So, you know, this isn't over. It's only if they keep on pushing the neoconservatives and neoliberals out of the party, try to, you know, find their values, prioritize the important things, then they can actually, you know, I think carry it through the next set of elections. They've made some really good first steps with their appointments, which is great. But there's going to be a lot of swamp creatures trying to pull Trump right back
Or
into
push
the
back,
swamp.
But you're not
Yeah.
giving Nancy Pelosi enough credit to be fair. She's
I don't
clearly an intelligent person. I mean, she's 200. I don't know what you're trying to insinuate, but she's on a couple of $100,000 a year, and she's turned it into 300 million.
That's right.
I
Somehow.
don't see a problem there. What's the problem?
Can you explain something to me? How do you know? You know how there's those trackers that show her trading patterns live? How do they track that live?
So I asked this question at I can't name the company, but let's just say one of the larger financial information companies in the world. And I said, look, the only people I know that outperform my results are
Nancy
other politicians. Okay. Now, to be fair, once I had, you know, significant money committed to me, because you can do a lot with, you know, 10 million or 50 million, 100 million, but when you start going to the billions, it's a lot more difficult because it's a lot harder to place trades, and you've got much bigger positions and things like that. So I said, well, you know, I can't get these sorts of results, you know, and I'm pretty good at what I do. And we couldn't find this information out. But apparently, and I haven't verified this yet, but apparently there's a few hedge funds now that are actually following what the political insiders are actually doing. So I don't know how to get access to the information, but if there's a private equity group, I hate you guys, but I will put a few million in if you give me a call. I send Joel an email.
Isn't there a guy on Twitter live? He basically tweets, okay, this politician's bought this amount of that. Now, I'm assuming it's as live as they can get it, but how live are we talking? Because
I think part of what you'd have to do is, if you've got a Bloomberg terminal, for example, you can actually see most people think of Bloomberg as being a financial information terminal, but it also actually shows you all of the laws and the rules that are going through. I believe Reuters does the same thing. I think if you look at that and you actually have a look at what's being proposed and what's coming up in front of Senate inquiries, congressional inquiries, etc., you can deduce what they're likely to do. And, okay, maybe I'm a little bit negative, but I would suggest that if you think that the thing being proposed is going to be really bad for the people, back that. Because you know that's what the politicians are going to do.
Guys, if you're on YouTube and you have any questions for us, please do ask. I'm working on a system for next week so that we can actually bring up questions live on the screen, so that we get more interaction with you guys. But I've had a few people making a lot of comments about interactions, but no actual questions, and I want to ask the panel questions. I did want to mention this story to you guys, because I've got a bone to pick with Ticketek, who have been annoying me in the last week. Candace Owens tweeted, "Can't believe I was overlooked for ambassador to Israel." And then she followed it up with, "Likely because I will be appointed to ambassador for Australia." Joke's on you, Tony Burke, the immigration minister. Now, if you didn't hear, Candace is fighting legally her challenge against Tony Burke. She believes that Tony Burke didn't actually appreciate her application for a visa to come to Australia properly. He commented on it before he actually had even seen the application. So that sort of legal impropriety is not very good. And she's actually postponed. She's emailed all ticket holders who bought tickets through Ticket Booth of this change. If we pull up this screen just here, you can see these are the new dates for March when the tour is actually on. Now, all of these dates have been done through Ticket Booth except for Perth. So everyone in Brisbane, Auckland, Sydney, Adelaide and Melbourne, you've been notified of this change last week and the new dates and the option to get a refund if you want one. But Perth, because the clowns over at Ticketek, and I mean clowns because they've been very slow on the uptake, it's been over a week and they still haven't made the change from the November date. So I'm letting you guys know right now that don't rock up on the 20th of November. It will not be on. And your ticket has been automatically moved to that last date that I just pulled up, the 8th of March. Now, if you want a refund, there will be emails gone out by Ticketek. But these clowns, they've left it basically to us to let you know. They will send you an email out. They will let you know of the changes. This is just one of many things we have to deal with when it comes to tours. But the other company, though, Ticket Booth, they've been absolutely phenomenal. They've been letting people know. They've been taking phone calls if they need. And they've already moved all the dates. So Candace wants to fight this. She wants to beat Tony Burke. As you can tell, she will be mentioning it in her show this week about what's been going on. But yeah, it is an absolute clown show that she is actually a personal friend of Donald Trump. She's hosted many events, including at the White House, for the Brexit movement. We saw a massive surge for Trump in the polls among black Americans, especially black men. And, if she was given, diplomatic immunity as ambassador to Australia, that would be hilarious.
Well, I think we should have a whip around and get a petition. Candace, are you watching? We love you. We're going to start a petition and say that we want you to be the American ambassador to Australia.
I'll do it.
Seriously.
I support that.
I'll set it up.
Yeah.
She couldn't be any worse than Rudd.
Exactly.
He's our ambassador to America.
But here's a woman who's black. And this is when you know when racism doesn't matter anymore, right? Because if you're a person of colour, your opinion matters unless you're on the right. If you're on the left, you're a hero. If you're on the right, doesn't matter how good you are. She's got no criminal
race
record.
traitor.
She's not done anything. She's not done anything wrong. What has she done? She's gone out there and expressed her opinion, and that's it. Who was the guy from Rebel News that was denied entry to New Zealand, right? And I just mental blank on her name right now, but the blonde girl, the blonde Canadian girl.
Lauren Southern.
Lauren Southern?
Lauren Southern.
Didn't she get denied entry to the UK? And Theresa May was in charge.
That's right.
At that point.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
Denied entry. So if you don't have a left-wing position, you're not able to express your viewpoint.
It's actually insane. This blonde girl from Canada is not allowed to the UK, but they've got stabbings going on. They had stabbings going on around about that time, 2017, 2018, and they didn't let her in.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Well, what a disgrace. What an absolute disgrace.
It's nuts.
So this is the world that, if we don't do something, this is the world we're going to live in, right? David Icke, I don't agree with some of what he says, right? I really don't, especially when he sits there and tells me about all the world leaders, the royal family are reptilians, right? Shape-shifting reptilians. Yeah, okay, cool. Cool story. I'm not going with it, but cool story. But you know what? If he was coming to Sydney, I'd go and see his show.
They blocked.
I don't need government to come there and tell me, Shaquille, I'm going to protect you because you might be falling for misinformation. No, dude, it's okay. Tell me the moon landings aren't real. Tell me that JFK was actually assassinated by the CIA. Tell me all the conspiracy theories. It's cool, but they won't let me see that. But when Michael Moore makes a movie suggesting that Republican leaders of America, including George W. Bush, were actually behind September 11, and there was a conspiracy there, and they did it deliberately in order to cause a war so they could make millions of dollars out of Halliburton, etc. Cool. No problems. We'll let that go out. Michael Moore can come to this country, and he can say whatever he wants to say, about right-wingers, but anybody has anything to say about the left? No, silenced.
We should make a list of all the people that have been denied entry to Australia. David Icke is one of them. Candace Owens.
Candace Owens.
Donald Trump Jr., right?
Katie Hopkins. She wasn't allowed during COVID.
Milo.
Milo Yiannopoulos, right? The second time. That was around about the time after the Christchurch shooting. They felt that he would inflame Australia.
Now they're going after J.K. Rowling.
I'm not sure if Novak
Really? I didn't know
counts,
that.
but I don't know. I'd put him in there.
Novak, absolutely. On medical grounds. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just about keeping him out. The other one was, Donald Trump Jr. They sat on his one until 24 hours before the event. We needed it 48 hours before. Yeah. This guy's father's the president of the USA now.
Wasn't Posey Parker? I think
Posey Parker. There was also Jordan Peterson. He wanted to come out for the Ark conference a couple of weeks ago.
They denied him.
No, they just don't give it to him. It's just nuts.
Wow.
It's like the guy hadn't come out here 2 or 3 times in the past and filled a stadium of 8,000 people at the ICC. It makes me so angry when I see this. And the liberals are just, they've got no concept of, it was under the liberals they stopped Djokovic. It was Alex Hawke, who was the immigration minister under ScoMo, that kept Djokovic out. He said, he might, incite protests and stuff. It's ridiculous.
But see, even if it was somebody on the left, like, let's take Destiny, your great friend Destiny, right? If Destiny wanted to come to this country and bag Australia, I don't like it. I really don't like it. But okay, cool, you'll fill something up in inner city Melbourne. Yeah. Come on over. Like, I would actually be opposed to Australia not letting him come into this country or anybody else who's on the left, right? If you want to come to this country and you want to, do a show and you're able to attract an audience, okay, cool. Like, go for it. I don't agree with you, but go for it.
These questions never go to a vote. There's never a plebiscite or anything like that. If you took this to the Australian people, they would say, look, we believe in free speech. Let whoever you want in, and if people want to go and see them, then so be it.
Yeah.
But these politicians, they just have to control everything. They have to make decisions on everything.
It's nuts.
It's nuts.
It's absolutely crazy. And to make matters worse, if you look at the actual history of this, when it comes to most countries don't have this problem. The idea that we're just going to police every single person that comes in if they're marginally wrong. But then they're making the call really wrong. We saw a situation where when we had that rapper out this year, Candace was denied entry for a number of reasons, including they said she had the capacity to incite discord. She had the capacity to incite discord. Everyone on this panel has the capacity to incite discord, and we are in Australia. You're going to deport us? And then on top of that, there was a rapper who was allowed in. He didn't incite discord. He incited violence at his event outside of Australia. 8 people died at this event. He was allowed into the country. He incited a fight at his actual event, and people got hurt. It's like that, and then but no, Candace, the mother of three, she's the problem. It makes me so angry.
I even remember when you brought Nigel over. I went down to that, and he got in, but then they made it so difficult by putting all sorts of restrictions and requirements and police attendance and make you spend more money to or if you're going to do this, it's going to cost you, sort of thing. So even when they allow it, they still make it difficult.
Even with him, we had a similar situation as we did with the Don Jr. one. When we brought Nigel out, they sat on it till I think within the week of him coming. It took Alan Jones calling up Albo personally and saying, give us the damn visa. I'm performing with him in Sydney. He's a member of the European Parliament, for God's sake. This is ridiculous what they're doing. It doesn't make any sense. And we had the when we were charged those police fines, basically. It's like a protection racket. You have to use our police force's security, otherwise, we won't let the event go forward because we've received credible threats. It's a shakedown. What is this, Church Street, Parramatta, 30 years ago? This is ridiculous.
No, not 30 years ago, now. Now. Why don't the police go up to those business owners and say, hey, if you all throw $100 in a week, we will put police around your restaurants and your bars so that you don't have standover people asking you for money. But the police won't do it there, and that's actually probably those business owners would appreciate that. They'll probably prefer it rather than having the standover guys come and ask them to hustle them for money. But as you said, the main issue that we're facing is you're not allowed to express your viewpoint. you're not allowed to bring somebody over to express your viewpoints because it might be shut down.
Yeah.
I've travelled all through Europe, unlike Kamala Harris. I've been to Europe a few times.
The border in Europe.
Right? And I've brought up some concerns, and I've mentioned some concerns, and I've inadvertently been around government ministers at a time that I was criticising their country to a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And like, oh, so-and-so is actually the minister for whatever department. I'm like, oh, sorry. Like, no, I'm fascinated, actually. I want to hear more about it. I want to hear what your opinion is. And I'd say to them, why do you want to hear my opinion? And their response has always been, because you're not that well versed in our politics and you're expressing your view as a layperson. So we know then what's actually going out there, so we can actually try to correct it and actually try to send a different message so that people don't have this view. If Albo is so self-righteous, what he should do is, rather than using force, what he should do is actually say, okay, here are the concerns that people are telling me, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a real effort into making sure I can affray those concerns. That's not what he does.
It's not about values. It's about control.
Absolutely.
It shows how out of touch these people are. Now, Albanese wrote an article against the misinformation, or for the disinformation bill in the paper recently. It was titled, "My Message to Mr. Musk, I work for Aussies, not you." Well, if that's the case, Mr. Albanese, who is asking for Candace Owens to be banned from Australia? Who is asking for this disinformation bill? No one. So you're saying you're working for Aussies. What are you actually doing for Aussies? The cost of living is going out of control. Young Australians can't afford housing. They're the issues that you should be focusing on, not censorship bills and blocking political commentators from entering the country.
Yeah, and that's the article there, guys. You know, my message to Mr. Musk: I work for Aussies, not you. And I was quick to remind him, hey, look at the last proposal you put up. This is how the country voted. You know, the whole country voted no except you and Canberra. And I think this is very much becoming a bit of a repeating pattern. Someone actually corrected the article and they wrote, "My message to Mr. Musk: I own the Aussies, not you." And but going back to it, we've received a question from our audience, and I wanted to bring it up. This is about Australia and the misinformation bill. Did you have something?
Yeah,
to close
so
it off?
just while you bring that up,
Sure, mate.
The Human Rights Commission for Australia. So, as many of you will know, we are one of the very few countries in the world that does not have a Bill of Rights.
Yep.
Now, there are many countries that have it that don't really abide by it, but we don't have one at all. What a lot of people don't know is that the United Nations human rights was actually spearheaded by the great Doc Evatt, a Labor Party person. We're the ones that spearheaded this, bullied other countries with our allies to incorporate it, and then Doc Evatt came back to Australia and we don't have it. But the Human Rights Commission themselves, I'll just read the last line of their statement on this, which is an Australian government organisation. Although there have been improvements to the bill, freedom of expression is not sufficiently protected. So if anybody wants to know, go to humanrights.gov.au. Even they themselves have some serious concerns.
And I will mention they did absolutely nothing during COVID when our human rights were being violated.
Because they're powerless.
100%.
Yeah, I do believe the new head of the commission is a lot better. She was actually trained under Professor Augusta Zimmerman, who's a fan of the show and the Light Australian newspaper. But yeah, I totally agree. And you know, it's so funny. It's all these government institutions, not this group, but the other groups that are actually in support of the Misinfo Bill. But going back to it, this has a lot of bearing on the Misinfo Bill. J.D. Vance has actually gone on record saying the following with regards to Australia, but specifically Europe, and them not allowing free speech and going after friends of his like Elon Musk. Check this out.
The leader, I forget exactly which official it was within the European Union, but sent Elon this threatening letter that basically said, we're going to arrest you if you platform Donald Trump, who, by the way, is the likely next president of the United States. So what America should be saying is, oh, if NATO wants us to continue supporting them, and NATO wants us to continue to be a good participant in this military alliance, why don't you respect American values and respect free speech? Excuse me, it's insane that we would support a military alliance if that military alliance isn't going to be pro-free speech. I think we can do both, but we've got to say American power comes with certain strings attached. One of those is respect free speech, especially in our European allies. Like, look, I'm not going to go to some backwoods country and tell them how to live their lives, but European countries should theoretically share American values, especially about some very basic things like free speech. The leader,
and that's exactly what's actually come up in these particular hearings on this committee.
Do you have the clip of one of the reporters actually asking Albo about his thoughts on that?
No, I don't have that particular clip, but I do have Senator Malcolm Roberts bringing it up in the Senate inquiry. I'll try and
Senator
pull that
Roberts.
up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to Citizen Go for attending and also for your submission. President Trump, who's just been swept to power, promises to dismantle the censorship regime globally. The Vice President-elect, J.D. Vance, has in the last few days indicated that the United States would penalise nations for adopting the exact measures contained in this bill. What effect will this have on the operability of this bill? Is this bill likely to undermine AUKUS?
Yes, it is, and the outcome of what President-elect Trump has said effectively makes this bill null and void and dead in the water. So you are trying to enact legislation, I said a metaphorical you, are trying to enact legislation that, well, you're not, are trying to enact legislation that would be effectively dead in the water. If I ran one of the major social media giants, Facebook, Google, or even X, I would just merely shut down my Australian operations, operate out of America where I have free speech amendment protections, and completely ignore whatever your legislation says. I know you're not going to shut me down, so I will just continue to operate.
Thank you.
And so, look, this has repercussions for Australia. How is even... All right, let's go back to the question. So, we go back to an audience-centric sort of show. The audience has asked us, is this Misinfo Bill going to pass? Now, look, if you asked me a month ago, I would have said yes. It would have passed the lower house as well as the Senate. Now, you're asking me today, just the facts. It obviously passed the lower house when the US election was on. We were never going to win that vote. Didn't matter how much we campaigned. We would never have won that vote. Just the way it was. Labor had enough seats. You got the Teals, the Greens, which gives them a massive, almost super majority.
It was the Teals that got it across. And I believe the Greens abstained from it.
Right. Well, they had it. That Labor have something like, they needed 76 votes. They have 79 members of Labor. And I do believe they got all of them to shops. They actually didn't need anyone. And then they had the Greens. And then they had the like 6 Teals or something, which is insane. It's well more than they needed. The question is, how will people vote at the Senate vote? Now, what it's essentially come down to is a handful of senators that we've seen in the past. Now, these senators,
4 of them, isn't it?
That there are 4 specifically. There's Senator Thorpe, there's Senator Jackie Lambie, and the last
Payman.
one is
it's Payman and
Payman.
There's
and
another
there's
one.
There's one other dude. Sorry, here we go. Craig Kelly. By the way, honourable notice to Australians versus the Agenda, Anthony, who's been doing a phenomenal job. But Craig's done a really easy breakdown of the what the vote actually looks like. They need 38 votes, basically 39 to pass it. Now, if you look at the specifics of where there are some members on the crossbench that have said where they're going to vote, there are some that haven't. Now, let me just bring this up so you guys can see this from Craig. Those that we don't know include Jackie Lambie, Senator Van, who was a former Liberal senator, Senator Thorpe, and Senator Payman. Now,
thank goodness we're relying on them.
Literally, and this is the thing.
They only need 2 to oppose it, and be okay.
That's right. Now, look, this is a very uneasy. Even if we win this, and by the way, guys, I think we are going to win this, but I don't want to leave it close. We will be doing everything we can to stop it. We've already sent over 30,000 submissions, which they're not reporting, by the way, because it was one of the most ever. We've already sent 30,000 submissions. We did that signed petition, 15,000 of you signed. We did 3 submissions for the Light, for the Ark Podcast, and for Turning Point Australia.
I did my own submission.
You did your own submission. That's very good. We will beat this, especially from emailing these members of Parliament. So if you haven't seen Australians versus the Agenda, if you haven't seen Craig Kelly's social media, do check out those that have the emails of these MPs under there, as you can see here. But we will beat this, but it won't be on very good terms, if that makes sense. We want to win the next election in the Senate. If we don't, then we'll be back where we started, and we'll be scrambling like we are now, and we don't want to be. Elections have consequences, and we are looking at those consequences right now. And what I'm saying is Pocock and Tammy Tyrrell, Pocock's the member for the ACT, the senator, and he's up for election again. He will likely win that again. That's just where things are going. Now, he's not voting no because he's a free speech, he believes there's a bastion of free speech, and he was standing up for the people during COVID and how censorship happened. He thinks the bill, to an extent, doesn't go far enough. If you want to see his full video where he explains this in a lot more length, it's on his Instagram, it's on his Twitter. I strongly encourage you to look out for it. He says he wants to support free speech, but he feels, I don't trust him. I personally don't trust him. You can watch it for yourself, make your own judgment. But it's not just him. It's Jackie Lambie. It's some of these crossbenchers. I do not trust them. We need to get as many of them out as possible so we're not in this position again. We need a supermajority, just like what the Americans have basically achieved on all the different chambers. And we need people to lead with conviction straight off the bat. We can't be in this position again. Otherwise, whether it's this bill, whether it's restrictions on finance, whether it's some LGBT bill, whether it's, the Babies Born Alive bill, there's a whole bunch of bills. We're going to be back where we are, scrambling, and we don't want to be here.
But the question is, Joel, even if we got a supermajority, can we rely on that supermajority to actually deliver to the Australian people what we actually want them to? Look at Senator Conroy's metadata rules, metadata retention laws. We all said we didn't want it. It got passed anyway.
Yeah.
The Liberal Party were in power for 10 years after that. It never got repealed.
If people, and no one, I don't know. I don't want to come across as too stark on this. The key to taking power on the right in this country is whatever party you're voting for, you should become a member of that party. Because when you're a member of that party, you get a vote in pre-selection, specifically the Liberal Party. If you're in the Liberal Party and you're not happy that, some of these senators are being selected for these spots, join the party. Vote in the pre-selections. Get started. In New South Wales, you get voting rights after 2 years, but in states like WA, you get voting rights after 30 days. 30 days. Get into the party, start changing it, do what Senator Antic has done. If you don't like the Liberal Party, if you're screaming at your screen now and saying Joel's a shill for the Liberal Party, join One Nation. Join the UAP once they pull their finger out. Join the Libertarian Party, who are actually fighting local elections and winning. Get active. The reason why they won in America is because they got Republicans off their asses. They got these low propensity voters out of their homes. They got them voting. That's what Charlie Kirk did. He targeted these swing states. And he got them getting more votes. They said, bring 5 friends, go register people. There was one event for RFK where there were 1,500 attendees, and Turning Point America went there. They registered 900 voters in August. There were 900 voters at that place that weren't even registered to vote there. This is insane. But this is what's going on in Australia. We've got a lot of people that saying, your vote doesn't count, don't show up. It counted in the referendum.
Look, we're in a little bit different situation because voting is compulsory. So we're not, even though there are some people that are abstain.
15%, that's not nothing.
Yeah, that's true. That is a large amount. And whenever you don't vote, you're giving your vote to the opposition, regardless who that is.
No, but if you're waiting for election day to make a difference, you've missed the point. Is what I was about. You need to get, as Joel said, you need to get involved in these parties to be able to pick the right candidates first.
Yeah, this is the point.
To echo your point, what would it have been like in the U.S. if it was a choice between Nikki Haley and Kamala Harris?
Exactly.
How done would we be? Pre-selection is absolutely where it's at. It would have been all over before it started in the U.S. if it was Nikki Haley versus Kamala Harris.
Well, I'll put it this way.
Pre-selection is where you get to choose whether or not you have a candidate who is worth voting for.
Yeah,
well, if Trump was shot,
sorry.
If Trump was shot, she would have been the nominee. She was the only one that won the most delegates.
Race.
By the way,
that was the plan.
Another reason.
In my best guess.
Another reason to thank God tonight. But
back to my point.
For us to say all of this, right? But you take someone like me. Believe it or not, I hate politics. I'm not interested in politics. I hate it. Right?
Politics is interested in you,
I have to pay attention to it because I'm in finance, and the politics affects the economy. The most people don't like this. Most people are not interested or passionate about any of these issues. So it's fine for all of us to sit here and make all these statements, and it's fine for many of the people that are viewing us who will probably sit there going, yeah, those guys are right. But the reality is that the overwhelming majority of people are not going to be motivated to do anything about it.
The suffering will continue until that changes. Things will get worse until people get off their asses and actually join in.
Elvis.
The only way you're going to get them off their asses is if you can actually show them that there's a problem that they need
How about
to
that
respond
one?
to.
Inflation.
So again, going back to that point, like as I said, voting is compulsory. There is an amount we need to get voting again, but the key is voter education. Now, like it's all great to to explain to people how preferencing works, but the reality is we've got to let people know what these parties actually represent, both the minors and the majors. Where are they heading? Where are they going? And one of the things which is I think has been a problem for a long time is politics and religion seem to be a bit, we don't talk about that. We kind of avoid those topics. I don't want to talk about it. It's no.
You don't go to the pub and discuss this.
No, we have to change that. You need to sit down. I mean, people watching this podcast know what's going on. They know, they've probably already worked out who they're voting for, who they want to support, how they're going to preference. But these people need to sit down and talk to someone. Just one person. Sit down, talk to them, explain things. They may not agree right away, but if you make a couple of salient points and something then comes up and they're like, oh, wow, he said that. Maybe he was right. Then they might come back and ask some questions. And then you talk to someone else, and then they'll talk to someone else. And then we need to spread the message.
I agree.
And it's through that education. And it's, again, making politics acceptable to talk about over the dinner table, with friends, at the pub. We need to be talking about this. Otherwise, we're just going to end up in the same place that we are now.
Exactly. And look, a lot of people, they've seen the resources I've put out at elections, whether it's the volunteer fund or whether it's the transparency reports, which show you members' voting records, our how to vote cards that are based on the policy matrix and all that stuff. But also, if you remember, guys, I've been talking about this map. The reason why I want to get this map into so many people's hands, it's not because I'm making a particularly large profit on them. It's because these are maps that only MPs have and political consultants have. This is almost like the Gutenberg printing press, where I'm trying to get this to as many people as possible physically so you can plan the election, so you can actually read where the key seats are. It overlays the 2022 election results with the referendum results, which show you where our people are, where the no voters are. If you wanted one of those, by the way, just email me at joel@thearkpodcast.com, and I will also send you some of the latest Light Australia newspaper issues. I'll throw 10 or so newspapers in there. But going back to it, with regards to this week and the Trump win and what it means for Australia, yeah, I mean, how are they going to enforce the misinformation bill? We've also had a shot in the arm of the in terms of morale. Everyone is very excited about the election coming up in March or May next year. And people are wondering, okay, this is great. Let's try and get these minor parties to come together. And I'll sorry to be a bummer, guys, but they're not going to do it.
No.
They're not going to do it to at least after 2028. Now, if you don't like that, again, the answer is the same. Join a political party, become invaluable, voice your concerns, throw your weight around, respectfully, and tell them where you want to see the country going. The model for the right is you need a conviction party that's a major party, a big one. The Liberals need to be reformed, but also you need the Nationals, the coalition, I meant to say, but they also need a complementary party as well, just like the Greens do with the left, a complementary party, one party, not 10, one party that actually it works together. It's a well-oiled machine, and it holds that big party accountable. It's the thought leader. We do not yet have that. And we also don't have our Trump figure yet. And I don't even know who that's going to be. I have no idea. It's certainly not me, that's for sure, because I'm not going to run in politics. But our side is not ready yet, so I don't think we're going to see that. That, again, this isn't to say you should be depressed, Australia's not going to turn around and whatever. We've got work to do. And I'm so glad the Yanks are coming in behind us, because I think they're going to give us the ability to oppose the misinformation bill by providing us a lot of support through Twitter.
Well, you brought up the question of who controls. Will this bill get through? Even if it does get through, there's another question: will it work? Now, when you see Trump coming out making statements like the censorship cartel must be dismantled and destroyed, and it must happen immediately. So you got to think, where are these social media companies based? They're hosted in America. When you upload this podcast, it's going to go to Rumble. It's not here in Australia. It's not being hosted here in Australia. So how are Australian laws going to impact on these social media companies when they're hosting it overseas? It's not going to be applicable. So how will they be able to enforce this bill when none of these? And you also have one social media company in Australia.
They're threatening the social media companies and say they're going to take. Was it 5% of their worldwide revenue and stuff like that?
They've tried that before. Morrison tried to tax them.
Yeah.
And Google just said, look, we'll just shut down our operations here in Australia.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He backed down.
And that's why it is so ridiculous. And you see the European Union actually said to the American companies, no, you're going to comply with our rules or else. And they did end up complying. I just want to come to the election stuff very quickly. If you're voting for an independent party, and I highly suggest that you do, because it takes money away from the as we've discussed on previous shows, takes money away from the majors. But if you're going to do that, at some point preference the Liberals or the Nationals, if you're in those areas, preference them or preference Labor. Because at some point you've got to preference them. If you don't, your vote sort of dissipates into the ether.
Well, you have to preference anyway on the lower house. It's only the upper house that you don't need to.
But people should, right? Because if they don't do that, then their vote just sort of disappears. And I just sent you a video on Nick McKim. So he's the Greens Party person from Tasmania. Now, look, this is an old video, but you see him cut sick in the Senate. You wouldn't see somebody on the right doing that because they'd be thrown out.
One of the things I'd like to echo about what you were saying, Joel, when you're talking about people getting involved, and a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to get involved in politics. I have to say, I didn't want to get involved in politics either. But over the last few years, you meet the best people of conviction, people with values, people with motivations. So you might think of it as a drain, but you really have met the coolest people.
As I said, I'm very new to it, and I found it extremely interesting, and I've continued to be involved. But yeah, going back to a couple of those points, something we have to remember, even if the disinformation bill isn't passed.
Mate, you can shut...
The Greens are after you.
All right, let's watch it.
The Greens are after you already.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll
play the video, yeah.
This is an old video, but let's just say, and he's the whip. This is a sort of behaviour we expect from the left, right? If any of our parties did this, it'd be all over the news.
Yeah, let's give it.
Let's say good old
Mate, you can shut your mouth. You can shut your mouth. People are dying
Senator McKim,
because
resume
of
your
you
seat.
and sociopaths like you.
Senator McKim,
I'm not going to cop interjections from sociopaths like Senator Canavan.
Senator
I will
McKim, resume
not
your
cop
seat.
And what they've got to answer for is death, disease, displacement, starvation, people dying of thirst, arable farming lands turning into desert, and most likely billions of people dead by the end of this century, and the collapse of the ecosystems that actually support all human life on this planet. That's what people like Senator Canavan have got to answer for.
These people like us.
I'm Nick McKim. All I wanted was some lower taxes and a bit more freedom, bud. That's all I wanted.
I was just listening to him. I was like, what's he talking about? Because it's been a while. I'm like, who's he yelling at? Oh, Canavan. I wonder what Canavan's... Is he talking about COVID? Is he talking about Palestine? Is he talking about... What's he talking about? And it's like, oh, climate change.
On the one hand, I like the passion, but his conclusions are completely 100% wrong.
Yeah, love the passion.
Well, anyway, back to the point I was making before he rudely interrupted me.
Told you to shut your mouth. Yeah, go on.
Well, he knows what's about to come. As I said,
even if remember.
Yeah, well, I know that. So does my wife. Even if the disinformation bill isn't passed, people need to understand the infrastructure is still going in place to bring it back. So digital ID has been passed. It's not compulsory yet. It could be used if there was a disinformation bill, or what's coming up now is our age verification bill. Okay.
Trojan horse.
Yep, it's a Trojan horse. It's an age verification, which means everyone has to do it, which means you need to provide your ID. If you don't want to provide your ID, I'm sure they'll provide a voluntary option of using your digital ID. So all the infrastructure is going to be put in place. And remember, the Liberal Party have already stated they're going to support this social media
ban. It's for the protection of the children, Elvis.
Right. Again, and again, why they're doing this age verification? Why don't they just make it compulsory that parents have to put a parental app on their child's phone or tablet? Because there's already software out there that does all this.
Because it's not about what they say it's about.
That a parent can take control of this and censor everything that their child sees.
That's right.
You can put the app on the phone. You can see what they're doing. You can shut down apps. It's all there. It's all available.
They cared about the kids that removed the pornographic books from the schools.
That's right. Can I just mention a few comments from the audience, Elvis?
Sure.
One person said, "Can I still climb a rock?" You know, there's this guy going off about climate change. Can I still climb a rock? Another person said regarding the parties thing. This is from Damien Costas. He said, you know, one thing Trump knew after campaigning for 4 years was that he couldn't fatten the pig on market day.
Yep.
You know, that's what made a difference, and it's so true. In fact, another thing, and speaking about Damien Costas, he's made a great point on this digital ID thing.
Yep.
First off, is there a genuine problem with kids accessing social media, and is it causing damage? Absolutely. Anyone that's read The Coddling of the American Mind, which I've got here, absolutely, it's a genuine problem. However, are we going to allow, you know, a digital ID system to be rammed through here? Most people would say no, you know, but
the digital ID's passed. It's a social media ban.
Not yet in the Senate, though. That's the thing.
I thought that.
Have they passed
the digital ID?
They passed the digital ID through the Senate.
It's passed. It's going to be implemented. It's voluntary at this point.
Right. But then for the good of the children, we're going to...
It'll be, I'm sure, like COVID, it's voluntary. But if you want to use this service or that service or this service...
Sorry. I was thinking about another video. I was looking at an old video. I was doing research on the Liberal Party, on the Misinfo Bill. And I found an old comment of them where they're actually saying, yeah, we will support anything to do with digital ID. Or the Misinfo Bill. That was
if you have a look at their website, CBDC, digital ID... They started the eSafety Commission and eCarron, Misinfo. It's all on the Liberal Party website.
Right.
So yes, they're opposing it now, but they have their own version of it. So if they get into power, if they get a majority, they'll bring in their own bill. So don't think it's dead in the water. It may stop now. Look, but as I said, the infrastructure, and I'm an IT person, the infrastructure is being put in place. So even if it doesn't come now, they can slot it in later.
That's right.
So that's where it also becomes important.
So the real question is, with all this legislation coming through here in Australia, which state of the United States should we all move to? Which one's the best one?
So I turn 41 next month. Right now, when I first moved to Sydney from Perth, the Year 11 kids, I was in Year 7, the Year 11 kids told me that Claudia Schiffer and Cindy Crawford were in Playboy and Penthouse. And I paid way more money than what those magazines were worth to get those magazines, and they weren't in them. I can tell you that. And there was no refund policy for some bizarre reason, right? Now, the old man and everyone on his side, they're all mechanics and truckers and all that sort of stuff. You go into their workshops, there was always girly pictures in the dunnies, etc. So what are we all so sensitive about? Right, like, okay, the hardcore porn that people can access on the internet, yeah, okay, it's a problem. The social media stuff that's going on and the kids being addicted to it, yeah, it's a problem. But the bottom line is, we don't need Anthony Albanese to parent the children of Australia.
It's a Trojan horse for authoritarianism.
And if I decide,
to think it's anything else is just naive.
If I've got a 12-year-old son and I decide that, yeah, I'm going to show him a soft girly magazine, Anthony Albanese, go away, mate.
Yeah,
it's my kid. Well, I don't need you to sit here and tell me what to do.
That's right, because it's a genuine problem, and the fault is, okay, the parents, both of them working a job that's just trying to get by, just hand the kid it's easy, hand them an iPad, let them just play and whatever, go on social media. But no, we do need the parents to have, first off, be making a lot more money, unleash the economy, cut red tape, cut green tape, make sure we have
much
low energy,
more important things going on.
So that they can focus on their kids. Now, specifically,
I agree that parents shouldn't just let their kids go on social media and just give them the iPad.
Yeah.
I agree that they shouldn't do that. I agree that they should be more responsive to their children. But the bottom line is, it's up to them, not government. Government has no right to step in on this.
100%. Now, going to this video, I'm just going to play this video. This is sorry. I was just listening back to what I just said. I didn't mean to say digital ID. I meant to say the 16-year-old
social
video.
media ban.
Yeah, this is the video of David Coleman, who actually happened to meet briefly the other day. David Coleman talking about the 16-year-old ban and the fact that the coalition will be supporting them in any pretty much vote. And I thought you guys might find this particularly interesting. Let me just double check. I have unmuted this. No. Very good.
Committed to introducing a social media age limit. It's world-leading legislation. It means anyone under the age of 16 will be banned from using social media apps. Anthony Albanese's called a special meeting of National Cabinet tomorrow to ask states and territories to support the proposal. It will come into effect 12 months after the passage of legislation and will be reviewed following its commencement.
The onus will be on social media platforms to demonstrate they are taking reasonable steps to prevent access. The onus won't be on parents or young people. There will be no penalties for users.
What our approach does is helps to achieve a balance between minimising those harms that are caused by young people accessing social media while still enabling connection and inclusion.
Let's bring in the opposition spokesperson for communications, David Coleman, live in the studio. This is heading in the direction that you've been arguing for months, isn't it? You'd welcome this.
Yeah, we do welcome it, Kieran. So back in June, Peter Dutton stood up in Sydney and said that within 100 days of being elected, we would introduce an age limit of 16 for social media. So shouldn't have taken as long as it has, all the issues with the trial that still hasn't started, etc. But it is good that the PM has got to that point today. Now, what we want to make sure is the legislation is strong and that it doesn't have exemptions or wriggle room for companies like Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat. We need a simple, clear system that clearly captures those big tech platforms. And we also want, Kieran, not only for the legislation to be...
You couldn't have it. I mean, just to pick up on that, you couldn't have an exemption for Instagram, could you? Or TikTok. Well, they're some of the key culprits.
Well, 100%. I mean, the government's talked about exemptions if the platforms comply with some as yet unspecified steps to make themselves safer. Right. But you can't make Instagram safe for kids. You can't make Snapchat safe for kids. You can't make TikTok safe for kids. It's impossible. So that's what we want to make sure that there's no exemptions like that. The other thing is we don't want the legislation to just be introduced this year. We want it to pass the Parliament this year, and we will facilitate that because there are millions of Australians who have been waiting for a long time for this legislation. There are Australian families who are at wit's end dealing with this issue of social media and the impact it's having on kids. So let's get this legislation into the Parliament. Let's vote on it in the House. Let's vote on it in the Senate. Now, we will work constructively with the government in the next couple of weeks, but let's get it done this year.
Get it through. Yeah. And then how soon would you like it up and going?
I mean, you do need some sort of implementation period, and we'll have a look at that as we talk to the government. But the most important thing...
As soon as possible.
Of course. But the most important thing is we don't want the government just simply to introduce the legislation and then say we'll come back to it at some point in the future. No. Let's pass it through the Parliament this year and let's make sure there is no prospect of exemptions for companies like Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat.
Yeah, that's fair. Do you expect some blowback from some of the big tech?
Probably, but who cares? I mean, they have had more than a decade to sort this issue out. They have shown a flagrant disregard for the mental health of Australian kids. They don't care. And we as a society have to stand up and say, enough. This is over. That's what Peter Dutton did months and months ago. We welcome the fact that the Prime Minister has now got on board with this, but we are concerned about this talk of exemptions and we don't want that in the legislation.
On an issue, I mean, I think you
guys get the point. The Greens, in one of the inquiries, actually made the point that if you're going to have to test for kids, you're going to have to test everyone to check. It's going to be like
the key. This is what I called it earlier. It's not a social media ban. It's an age verification bill, or more importantly, an ID verification bill, because the only way they can verify your age is by verifying your identity. So whether it's through facial recognition or putting ID in, it's about tracking all Australians on social media. I don't care what they're saying. It's not just to restrict those under 18. It's about tracking and controlling everyone. And again, my prediction is it'll be linked to digital ID. Later on, when the disinformation bill is ever brought back again, or if it passes this time, it'll be linked to that. And eventually, it'll all become part of a social credit system. I mean, that's where it's all heading towards. And people need to understand it's not a fantasy. The infrastructure is being put in place. They just need to pass the bills.
That's
I just want to understand
millions of Australian families that say that they support this and they're waiting for it. I'd love to know where they are. I'll just remind everybody, if you ring the tax office, they give you the option to register yourself based on your voice print. You have the option to opt out right now, but it's only a matter of time before they'll register that. This is what we're all talking about. Government needs to get out of the way and stop taking a bigger and bigger role in our lives.
That's right.
Well, they did the same thing. Like, I'm sure most of you are company owners, when they set up the director ID. So they made director ID compulsory. Now, what they did is they said, you have to have a digital ID to register a director ID. But what they didn't tell you is it's not compulsory. You don't have to use a digital ID. You could just contact them directly and verify your identity through the documents they have records of already. But they tried to force a majority of directors into getting a digital ID to register their director ID. Obviously, I knew what was going on, so I'm not going to get a digital ID. So I've looked into it, found a phone number, I've called them directly, and I'm saying, hey, don't have access at the moment, want to get a director ID, how do I go about it? They said, you just got to confirm your identity. I go, what do you need? They go, give me your date of birth, your address, your passport number, and something else. And it's like, you're sorted, you've got a director ID. Didn't need a digital ID.
Overseas.
But everyone else was going, you have to have it. I have to have a digital ID. I can't get it. Because that's what they wanted. The way they phrased it on the website, it was as if it was compulsory. But it wasn't. And again, it's compulsory until it isn't. It'll reach a point where you'll have to have it to access my director services, or later on, whether it's your Medicare or anything else like that. If you don't have it, you can't access it, but you don't need to have it.
Yeah. Rami, did you say something before?
Well, I'm just confused, really, because you can trust kids to, do things to their body and change their gender and all that sort of stuff, but they can't trust them to be on their social media. That's crazy.
Well, if they commit a serious enough crime, they can be prosecuted as an adult because they've made an adult decision, but they can't make an adult decision to be on Snapchat.
Isn't that a salient point? That's brilliant. Gentlemen, I could chat to you guys all day, and it almost feels like it's a short podcast after that 9-hour one we did. Did you know Charlie Kirk's one was 11 hours?
Wow.
Wasn't that much longer than our one. But no, I think we're still it's going to take at least another month to really understand the repercussions of this win and what it means for Australia and the world. But guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. I feel like there's a ton of things we barely got to. I got so many notes, and I'm sure you guys too from the podcast.
We'll have to get back together again sometime.
We'll have to.
Like a family reunion.
I guess we'll have to. And by the way, guys, let me know in the comments. I was half considering on Monday night doing a watch party of the Q&A meltdown after the Trump win. Is that something you'd be interested in? It'd be a late night stream, 9, 10 o'clock at night. So do let me know if that's something you'd consider. I'd happy to come in on my own and do it, but let me know. I know you'd show up.
I'd show up for that.
You'd night owl.
Absolutely. Watch the ABC lose their minds. I'd definitely be there.
Yeah, Matt Canavan took them on one-on-one this.
Excuse me.
I just want to say to our friends
have
here,
them to lose them.
How great is it though to see the Democrats and the left-wing media sit there scratching their heads? Oh, we're not really sure why we lost. It must have been misogyny. It must have been sexism. Because the one thing it couldn't possibly be is the thing that the American people told them coming into the election, and are still telling them now: the economy, immigration, healthcare, etc. That they won't listen.
Yeah.
So I say
racist, obviously.
let them do it. Maybe we should stop correcting them.
Yeah, the Hispanics and the blacks, they're racist.
Oh, I've got to mention this because I know this was going to be on your list, was all the leftist women shaving their heads and abstaining from sex. And we're like,
right.
The only problem is you're not actually punishing the conservatives because they pretty much have conservative girlfriends.
Yeah.
And so it could actually work out because if they stop breeding, then the conservative side is going to grow and they're not. So maybe it's not such a bad thing.
And some of them have said, we're not going to have children unless we're married. Yeah, cool, good. I'm glad we've had a good effect on you then.
Yeah. No, that's just brilliant. In fact, I was looking at a tweet, was it last night? There've been a few tweets on this. This particular girl was remarking that, yeah, liberals, they're not having kids, whereas the conservative girls are having kids, and that's good for America because we're going to outbreed the left. Yeah, check this out. This video from this stunning-looking young lady.
Unfortunately, I don't have a feed.
You don't have a feed? Well, you just have to imagine, guys. You'll just have to imagine. But I guess it's really awesome. I saw another meme where it was like, women are they've found conservatism and they've closed their legs. Basically they don't want to have sex. They're sanctioning men.
Well, that's funny because that meme came up a while ago where it, suddenly war's declared and all of a sudden women return to their traditional values.
In
Sure, you
Ukraine,
don't want a sandwich?
Yeah, in the Ukraine, it's like, yep, I'll make the sandwiches. Whereas the conservative woman on the other slide, it showed a conservative woman, and she was like, I'm so glad Trump's in. Now, we'll have enough money for another kid. I can't wait till my husband gets back from the fire department. I was like, damn. I was like, okay. Anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you guys want to support the show, by all means, click the link in the description. Flick us a few bucks at PayPal. If you want to purchase a map, that's another way you can support. I'm sending at least 10 copies of The Lights issue 14 as a complimentary thing as well. Do let me know. We're going to take back Australia. Thanks to Donald Trump, we have our freedom of speech secured. And thanks to these lovely panelists, we've meandered through the topic successfully today. Thank you guys so much. And next week, we'll have your comments up. I'll see you later.